Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you very much for the invitation, distinguished guests and speakers. I'm from SITA, and I'd like to talk a little bit about innovations that are shaping the customer experience. And I think we heard a lot about that, so I'm not going to dwell too much into that. A quick introduction about who we are, who I represent, the company that I work for. It's SITA. We are a technology company that supports the air transport industry, focus on airlines, airports, ground handlers, and government agencies. So we're very old. We've been 70 years in industry. We have 1,000 airports. We're present in 1,000 airports. We are also present in 220 countries and territories. So we have primarily serving the industry for the last 70 years. Just to put in the context of what we do, so we have basically 95% of international destinations covered by our SITA network in terms of telecommunications. We provide a lot of the self-service kiosks, 5,500 around the world, 45,000 check-in desks, also in over 430 airports. We do joint innovation with the industry, which I think is very important because we can talk about trials in terms of blockchain, artificial intelligence, robotics. Then we also work with the government agencies in terms of facilitating the arrival process of a passenger. So in our system, we handle about 300 million passengers, and we have the system in over 20 countries. We provide On Air is our subsidiary, and which provides telecommunications for aircrafts. If you want to use your Wi-Fi or mobile phone on a plane, that is enabled with one of our solutions. And then from a baggage perspective, which I think is going to be a critical challenge, we're also present in 2,800 airports, providing solutions for tracing the baggage. Now, let's go and talk really about the passenger. I think the idea to talk about the passenger experience, for me, it covers in three elements. It's customer-centric. We all talk about the customer experience, so airports and airlines are talking about the customer centricity, putting the customer at the center of that business. It has to be intuitive, because what Mr. Bashir mentioned, you have to enable anyone to use that system. So it has to be intuitive. Whether you are digital native, like you guys, very young, or if it's my grandparents actually want to use that system. So it has to be intuitive for them as well. And it has to be connected, because we want to push as many services as possible. But what it means is, if we are customer centricity, it's about different personas. Because if you go to an airport, or if you're an airline, you have the families, people that travel with a family, a business person, if you're going to visit your family or friends. So you have different types of profiles, and you have to cater to them. Some of them will want the full service. Some of them will just want to buy specific parts of that service. So we need to be able to provide that. Then we look into, I think the key element of what we do today, it is about the customer. He or she, they are integral part of the service. So if you buy a self-service, if you do a self-service check-in, or if you enable your passenger to book services online, they are actually doing the function that used to be done by someone else before. If they cannot perform that function, you fail in delivering that service. And also the customer experience, it's about the journey, and it's not about an isolated transaction. We tend to look at the experience as, okay, I look at the check-in, I look at the way I drop my bag, and then it goes security, immigration, and boarding gate. We tend to forget that the passenger journey is throughout. It's from the moment the passenger leaves the home, arrives at the destination. We cannot forget that it's not an isolated transaction. This is about the personas that I talk about. These are some of the things that we did in our survey. So they have different personas, and that would also help you to determine your self-service strategy. People that are willing, because there has to be a willingness of the passenger to buy and adopt that service. And this kind of profile enables you to do it. One example that I felt that was very interesting was San Francisco. They worked with Gensler, the architectural company. And they did a massive work in determining they determined 9 different profiles, determined what are the services they're willing to use, and they designed a new terminal in San Francisco based on those experiences, based on those profiles as well. This is what I was talking about. It's about the voice of the customer. This is this diagram here, it's from McKinsey. It's all about the different touch points. We tend to look at a very high experience with an agent, but then you go call center, support, and overall is a 60% satisfaction. So we can actually perform well in one of the touch points, but we should perform along the journey. It has to be intuitive. As I said, it has to be logical and it has to be natural, has to be easy to use. It is common sense. We all talk about it, but it is very important when it comes to implementing a solution, when you go and buy a solution or service from someone, it has to be all of that. We tend to forget, we tend to look at it from a technology perspective. We forget that the passenger is the one who's going to use it, not our agents, but the passenger. And for that passenger is someone like us, or someone who actually is not a native, who's never used a system before. And to do that, you need to have an insight. You need to understand the customer. And what we talk, when we see today, airlines do have that knowledge. They have the CRM. Airports are moving in that direction as well. They are looking into building that knowledge, that insight of the customer, because they want to create an intuitive solution. Connected, because we cannot live without our mobile phone. We see as an opportunity for us to provide services to connect and communicate with them. And also, it's about providing a full immersion of an experience. It's a sense of place. If you look at Istanbul, the new airport, if you travel through other airports like Singapore, you will see how immersive experience is. You can have a sense of place, an identity of your own culture embedded in the airport in that experience. And also the different touch points and context awareness. Everywhere I travel through the airport, I should be able to communicate, or someone should be able to communicate with me. Granted, we have to take into account data privacy, permission-based communication, but it is something that is going to happen. Every touch point, you could enter and engage with your customer. So why we're doing all of this, let me see if I hope I can make it work, because I don't have a mouse. That's why we're doing it, because we want to enhance that customer experience. So now let's talk a little bit about the future, because I think we heard a lot about what are the processes are, what technologies have been used. But let's see a little bit what is happening today. In terms of technology, this is based on our SITA IT Trend Survey. So what airlines are doing in terms of development, and you see today an example of what is happening, mobile application being developed. Cybersecurity is coming, is a very hot topic for the CIOs. And from an airport perspective, they also have, that was supposed to be airlines. 80% of the airlines are also invested in business intelligence. They want to know what to do with that data. There is so much data around, and what do you do with that? What does it mean to have all that information? How do you actually use that? How can you monetize that data? So from an airport perspective, it is, without looking into the self-service, and I think this is the direction that the industry is going to go. Again, cybersecurity, it is critical, and BI, these are some of the things that is going to be topic of in the CIO's agenda in terms of new technology trends. In addition to that, when we start looking at the check-in, we look at an evolution of check-in. Let's face it, the traditional check-in that you have today is 40, 50 years old. It's a counter, an agent, a belt, in some cases when you do have an injection belt for the baggage. Is this the terminal design that we wanted in the future? Will it be like that? If you start looking at some developments, I've been working as a consultant with airports like Changi in Terminal 5, looking at Heathrow in the expansion program. Do you really need to have a counter? Terminal 4, if you have the opportunity, if you've seen Terminal 4 at Changi Airport, half of that terminal is completely self-service and half of that terminal is for airlines that actually require a counter. So the question is that the design, is that the future that we're going to go for it? Then we look at a kiosk and we start looking at in terms of, do we need to have the kiosks that we have today? Can we have robots that actually, a robotic kiosk that will come in, self-deploy, self-position itself? Maybe. I think there are some challenges with that, but I think it could be a reality. That picture here is from Air New Zealand. It's just a gimmick, but they did it 3 years ago. They got a robot, basically show the boarding pass, and it talks to you what is the gate, where to go. But then there is nothing you to stop. I work with a company where we start looking at avatars and using artificial intelligence to help passengers who would be afraid of key in on the screen. So basically we'll guide the passengers through the whole check-in process as if the passenger is engaging with an agent. Maybe futuristic, but that is something that could happen, and it will happen eventually. However, the biggest challenge, and I think we didn't really talk too much about it, was the baggage, because the baggage is the biggest challenge from an airport. Because the way a terminal is designed, you have the conveyor belts, and that dictates where the check-in counters are going to go. So the moment you move, where are you going to start processing that baggage is also going to change the terminal. It's going to change the design. I work with other companies, not companies, but universities. Was also I'm a lecturer, and we are doing a project into defining a baggage-free terminal that's going to look at not off airport, for example. It's not checking in town and arrive the baggage, but looking at the design without the current sort of conveyor belts that you have it. The other thing is just all the different methodologies you have. The counters, this is fitted with biometric, RFID for the baggage, RFID, which is a good thing because IATA finally confirmed that RFID is a technology that is going to go for it. Then you have embedded technology for bag tag, traditional, then self-service as well. The thing is, technology is changing, and we heard in one of the presentations about disruption. This is a company, I don't know if you've ever heard about this company, it's called Letot. You can rent all your clothes. You rent your shoes, accessories, a handbag, trousers, whatever it is, you rent it. It gets delivered to your place, you use it, put it back in a box, and you go away. So the questions that I sometimes ask some of the architectural firms that I work with, what if this takes off? You would not need a large conveyor belt system to handle the volume of bags. Just to put in perspective, when we start talking about baggage, Frankfurt Airport has 86 kilometers of conveyor belts to move the baggage in the terminal. Massive infrastructure. So disruptive technology, who knows? When we talk about immersive technology, so we're looking at here, for example, it's using HoloLens. This is a project that we did with Finnair and in Helsinki. So looking at virtual operations control center. So you put a HoloLens, you try out, you can play, you can see the dashboards, you can see what is happening with your operations, you can play. So it's a virtual experience. Lufthansa is doing that to sell seats for upgrades at terminal. I think it's at Frankfurt. So they can actually give you an immersive experience, what you're going to find at that particular airport or a particular flight. This one is also Finnair. This is quite interesting. It's a whole large screens, music. It's all representing the country. And it's all the music, the birds, so it's actually a full immersive. So you're there resting, so you can actually feel and experience Finland. This is in Singapore. This is all screens. actually representing the old shop houses in Singapore. This is Oman. This is basically a figurative display, but this is in LAX, large, massive screens, actually, again, creating a sense of place. And this is in Christchurch. So when you come off the plane and you arrive in Christchurch, you hear sort of whales, music. It's very calming. It's a very interesting experience. That's, again, you're branding your own experience. So, we're almost there. The future is about new approach and deep understanding of customer behavior. It's all about human factors. Being able to use a mobile phone, an ATM machine is about human factors. It's about understand how they're going to use that, but literally understand the customer behavior. It's also a culture of agility. Everything happens so quickly that we need to be fast. We need to be agile. Decluttering the operation. Because today we work, and it's so convoluted the way we work. And our industry, it carries a very strong, big legacy behind it. So we need to be more agile in terms of how we deploy things and how we actually going to process passengers and make it an operation faster and more efficient. It has to encourage innovation. It's very nice to see what Turkish Airlines is doing with InMapper, because that is innovation. We need to co-innovate. We can't, as an industry, an airport, an airline, you cannot survive on its own. So you have to be able to collaborate, bring technology, bring innovation into your business. And also it has to foster collaboration, because the reality is airports and airlines are co-dependent. There is an interdependence in their business, so we can't live without them and vice versa. So it's very important that that collaboration is there. But also, in all of that, you have to have an adaptable infrastructure. Technology is evolving. If you look at IGA, it's a new airport, so they build this new airport. It has to have this agile infrastructure, so as technology evolves, it enables them to bring on board all these new technologies that are coming. So you have to have that adaptable infrastructure. So I'm going to close very soon, in a minute. Talked about collaboration, talk about the business opportunities and technology. Technology has to enable your business. Right, so there are academic studies that have been made, the relationship between technology and the use of technology to enable the business. And this is what technology does. You have to set out a vision. You, as students that will come out in the market or become managers, you have to set out the vision for your business. And technology has to enable that vision to be delivered. It is also about sustainability, and we start looking at our business, particularly from an airport perspective. Once you build an airport, the airport it will be a long-standing infrastructure, and it has to be sustainable. It has to survive economic crisis, disruption from technology perspective, so you have to build sustainability in your business. How are you going to do it? You have to focus on your customer, understand the behavior, because that adaptability will keep you competitive. Don't forget, you are competing. Airlines compete with airlines, airports compete with airports, so you have to have that competitive advantage. Technology will help you to do that. You have to be proactive, and I think that comes the core innovation, and also relevant. You cannot pretend just to be an airport and hope that passengers or airlines will come to you. You have to be relevant to their business as well. So it is very important to build that sustainability in that business. And from a smart infrastructure, agile and flexible. It has to support everybody that operates within the airport. Airlines, ground handlers, government agencies, concessionaires. Don't forget the other people that are selling their business, they're selling things that are actually making money for the airport as well. So they need to be supported in that journey as well. It has to be a platform for innovation. That is a given. If someone wants to bring innovation, if someone wants to use robotics, artificial intelligence, that platform has to enable that. And finally, it's about providing that flexibility. You have to be agile, because things are moving so quickly and so fast that if you are standing still, you're moving backwards very rapidly. So I'm going to show you one last video, and I will conclude that presentation. And with that, I conclude the presentation. Thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you. Questions? No questions.
I actually have two questions. One is about the journey experience. I think we have not discussed something. I think a lot of one of the presentations here is security. This is becoming a key part of our journey experience. For example, if I travel to the United States today, I'm actually going through 3 screenings, 3 document checks, and etc. IATA has spoken about that, but you know, the physical aspect of it is still there, and I have not seen that part. How any suggestions how we can improve that part? First of all, that, and for the baggage part, I have to question whether we are too conservative as the aviation industry, because there are ways now to collect baggage automated fashion. Well, it's going to come to that soon, but it's all, as I've seen, it's like we're all invested in this carriage, the band and the locations and etc. I think today, recently we had there was a hype on motorized baggages, but they were banned because they had lithium batteries in them, which mobile phones have. But apparently that's not a problem unless it's a Samsung Note 7. And also you have, for example, it's all the robots I've seen is pretty static, where I know that there's robot technology that's quite mobile, Amazon uses in their warehouses, and that could be used also pick up luggages. And if the luggages could communicate, they could probably meet each other and collect, and then the band or the counter wouldn't have to be there. So do you think we are too conservative in the technology choices, or are we too invested in the infrastructure that exists?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I'll answer your question 2 first. Yes, I think we are conservative. When I did my PhD, because I did my PhD on technology and airport performance, one of the things that came about the research was the airports, they are very conservative. They label themselves as fast followers. So yes, they are very conservative, and yes, I think primarily because the architects, the people that are planning the airport, they're looking purely from an infrastructure. They're not looking from a technology perspective. I think now I believe that they are working, and we've been working with a few architecture firms and engineering firms. They are looking into new technologies. For example, what you mentioned about it. Yes, you can have autonomous vehicles to carry baggage, so you don't need a massive infrastructure of conveyor belts. You can use robots from that perspective. Well, Amsterdam Ship will use robots to build containers. So I see that is a natural step, natural move, but it is primarily the culture of that the airports have. They're still very conservative. But I think I've seen things that is happening. If you look at Vanderlande or Bomer that provide baggage handling systems, they are actually looking at technology, looking at robotics, they're looking at IoT to track some of those devices as well. So I would say that in probably the next 5 and 10 years, we'll see a big change in terms of handling the baggage. From a security perspective, I agree, and I think that is one of the biggest challenges that the industry faces today, because we can all talk about facilitation, but at the end of the day, governments will have to allow some of those changes in the process and procedures. Through our government solution line, for example, we have my colleagues that work with government agencies. They do want to do a risk-based assessment. So that means they know who I am, and they know that truly that I'm Carlos KADUOKA, and there shouldn't be, I passed through all the assessments, so I shouldn't go through that same security screening that I passed through versus someone who actually is a potential threat. So they're looking a lot about that risk-based assessment. Also from a security processes, and it's quite nice to see the evolution of ACI and IATA working in smart security. So they're looking at redesigning the way they input. But also, primarily from my personal perspective, it is a question of change the legislation. It's change the minds of our politicians who will make it, the process easier and faster for us, the traveling public. I know that probably I didn't answer your question, but it will be the process unless they start changing it. But if you start thinking about new technologies like biometric or blockchain to providing your information ahead of time, do pre-clearance, that probably will help as well. But then they need to have faith that this is something that is going to work. But it requires two governments to put their heads together.
The standards are all over the place. I mean, if I travel to United Kingdom, I done it, I think, this summer, I couldn't put my laptop in my carry-on. I had to go to my bag. If I go to the United States, I got swiped my hands. If I'm traveling to Hong Kong, there's no problem. I just go through X-ray and that's it. Apparently, the security considerations are all different all over the place.
It is, and I think that is going to be a challenge when we start talking about biometric identification, because some countries will use, for example, if you go through Singapore, yes, they have that process, biometric facilitation, but then you have two steps. They do facial and fingerprint. That's because they couldn't agree. The airport wanted something, which is the facial recognition. Immigration, HMA, ICA, they wanted the fingerprint because that is the biometric token that they take in on arrival. So even governments, the same country, they couldn't agree which the token to use. And yes, the problem of our industry is the standards. You have ICAO talking about facilitation on Annex 9, but this is something that it will, unfortunately, the differentiation that they have versus standards versus recommended practices. Today, we're operating on recommended practices, which means you should adopt, not you will adopt or shall adopt.
Thank you.
That's it. Okay. Thank you.